Hey, good morning, everybody. Okay, so it's Friday. It's June 21st. We're most of the way through June, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
Yeah. And
June's almost over.
yeah,
We are into summer. We're into summer by about this is 4:50 yesterday, so we haven't done one full day, but this
yeah,
one full day will be the day where we have the longest amount of sunlight in a
yeah.
24-hour period
Longest
from
amount of sunlight.
4:50
Yeah,
from 4:50 yesterday to 4:50 today would be the longest day, I think, the
yeah.
longest daylight in a
Hours.
day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So good morning, Mike Cushman, as always. Okay. So
Nice musical, Mike.
doing this for our friend who's flying for the first time, Gary Wilkins. He's flying for the first time, and he asked on Facebook yesterday for suggestions about what you do for flying for the first time. Ouch, that hurt.
Well,
You
you know what? You've never flown before, but it's a piece of cake. Basically, it's a bus that goes up in the air. It's a pain in the ass. It's a metal tube, something, and it's now pretty much the same thing as a bus, except it flies. It's a flying bus, basically, Gary.
yeah.
And I don't know where you're going. Um, I have a few horror stories that I will not tell you.
I'm not going to tell horror stories. I will say, however, I have never. I probably flown 500 times, maybe more, and I have never, ever liked takeoff. And what I hate about takeoff is, you know how they say sit upright and etc. What I hate is that I can guarantee you the guy in front of me is sitting in my lap before we've even left the end of the runway,
Seriously?
because he throws his seat back. You know, you're sitting
Oh yeah.
upright and he throws his seat back, right?
Yeah.
Fully back. And he's got the seat that actually will sit right in your lap. You can't get a frigging thing. You know? So, but anyway, because I don't like takeoffs, one of the things I did early on was brace myself against the seat in front. So put my arm solid against that seat in front, because I was terrified at takeoff. And because I braced myself, that person can't put their seat down.
Well, Gary, if you're listening, if you're like me, you'll like takeoff. Takeoff's the only cool thing about the whole thing. The plane goes out in the runway, and then it guns it up and lets it rip down the runway, and up in the air it goes. The rest of it's just one big bore, basically, unless you hit turbulence, and then you get bounced around a little bit, but it's never a big deal.
It's the
And then
turbulence that, yeah, it's the turbulence that of the horror stories.
don't let that scare you,
Yeah.
Gary. If you get into some turbulence and the plane starts bouncing around, it'll sometimes it'll feel like you're in an old station wagon with no shocks. Bump 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 bump. Don't worry about it. That's
Yeah.
just one of the things that happens. It's just like going over a rough road, basically.
Yeah.
And if you landing is the next thing.
Landing
That's
is
probably the next
landing is
most exciting thing is because you want to get out of there by that time. You want to get out of that metal tube.
well, landing. I've never a problem landing. I love landing. The most interesting landing point in. I came into Faro in southern Portugal, and 90% of that landing was over the ocean, right, over the Mediterranean. Did not even see land until the last, we were more or less touching down. Didn't see land until then. But the most interesting one I've ever flown into is Kelowna, British Columbia, because you're flying in there and they're bank this way because you're to get because of the shape of the valley, and then they bank that way for the shape of the valley, then they bank that way for the shape of the valley. And the worst is off the wingtips. You can see that we're about 100 meters off edge but each wingtip is that how close the mountains are.
Yeah, so we're not supposed to scare Gary.
Yeah. All right.
All right, Gary,
No,
it's a piece of
enjoy.
cake. It's like
Enjoy.
getting into a flying bus, basically. It's a big fat bore, most of it. Uh, the only thing that you'll uh, kind of be cool is Mike Cushman says, I'm putting money on Gary will not go, who wants to start a pool. Hey, look, um, look, Gary Wilkins might be afraid of flying, but I wager the green bastard from Parts Unknown, his alter ego, is not afraid of flying. So I think if that might be a solution for him, dress up like the green bastard from Parts Unknown, says he has the costume. So then if he changes persona, he may not be afraid of flying. How's that for psychology?
There you go. Yep, there you go. All right, but I wish you well, Gary. I think you can conquer it. It's to me, it's always the takeoff. That's the bit I don't like. Turbulence, I don't care about. It's just a bit of a judder as you're flying.
Yep. If you run into turbulence, and for first time flyers, it seems to be, oh, what the heck? But if you look around, nobody's really even paying much attention.
And by the way, I would also say the one other bit of advice is don't go hard on the booze.
No, not unless you want to.
Well, going hard on the booze, the trouble is that flying does odd things when you're drunk.
Yeah, look, stay. Well, you're not going to have the opportunity anyway. They'll give you a couple of drinks if they see you hitting the sauce. They'll slow it right down, so it takes you like an hour to get a drink. They have ways. It wasn't like in the days when I flew, when you could bring in your own bottle and drink it up. You buy your own bottle and duty free. That's what we used to do when we went to Air France and when we crossed the border, because we were drinking everything. We were partying all. That was our last big party before we go into the desert, and we'd be partying hardy on the airplane. And then finally, they would cut us off all the booze, right? Tell us to shut up, and then we break into our carry-ons, and we'd have another bottle. And then they would. I think the funniest thing I ever saw was the steward come down, and we're just hooting and hollering and having a good old time. And he says, "I will call you'll please behave yourself, or I will call the gendarme." We all start laughing. We're like somewhere around Iceland. I said, "What are you gonna do? Land in Iceland and get the cops?" I will call the QPP, because we came out of Montreal, right? And it's just, we're going the other way, buddy.
Too logical. He sounded drunk to me, anyway.
Yeah. So like there was no controlling us, and they started splitting us up in smaller packs before they send us back over. Oh, something I like to mention right now is Donald Sutherland has died.
Yeah.
That's a very sad thing. Donald Sutherland has died pretty much on the solstice, and he was just shy of his about a month or so shy of his 89th birthday. He was one of the best actors of his generation. He was always a really good actor. Some of the stuff that he acted in, I didn't really like, but some of the stuff I really did. One of the greatest and most powerful movies I've ever seen was called Ordinary People. I saw that on a flight coming back from Libya one time, and I wasn't going to watch it because it looked like it was too dull, but I thought, I'll give it a try anyway. It was one of the best movies I've ever seen. Ordinary People, one of the best stories told on screen, and Donald Sutherland was part of that. And it shows you the scope of his acting, because in this case, he was just a concerned and confused father, and in any other movie he would be a different guy. He could play any part, and in this one he played an essential part. But the Mary Tyler Moore and the guy that played the child, the son of those two, were the main characters. And there's a psychiatrist, the guy that used to play in Taxi, who used to be the sensible one in Taxi, was a psychiatrist in it. But it was a very powerful movie, and they needed Donald Sutherland to be just like he was in that, to be a sort of a counterweight to Mary Tyler Moore. It was really fascinating. If you ever get a chance to see that movie, do. It's deep though. It's not one that's it's not a feel gooder.
Yeah. Okay. So moving on, the two St. Catharines restaurants and the St. Catharines food retailer, two Niagara Falls restaurants and the St. Catharines food retailer were closed temporarily following health inspections. And one question that I have with this is that I know that we have to be very careful in relation to the food, etc., that is served. But are health inspectors getting a bit OTT?
No, as a matter of fact, there probably isn't enough health inspectors, and probably isn't. As a matter of fact, there's probably not enough of them. I knew a health inspector, and he just told me flat out that he takes bribes. That was back in the 70s, right?
Yeah.
I knew a guy. I went to school with him, and he got into health inspect. He says it's a piece of cake. Go in if it's not too bad. I could point out a few things. They'll give me an envelope, and away I go. She's making a lot of extra money doing that. And I probably don't think that's going on much anymore, but it could. Graft of that kind was not unusual. Somebody would go in and see if anything wasn't really, super bad. Let's face it, you're going to get vermin, you're going to get cockroaches, you're going to get mice, you're going to get all those things are attracted to a restaurant.
We know that occurs particularly in the food industry, but I also know that like health inspections have to go in a wide range of things like nail salons, tattoo parlors and that sort of thing. And I also noticed that in one instance I've seen it was a tattoo parlor that was inspected about 5 times in 5 years. It was as if they were on a hit list or something.
Well,
that is why I was asking
if they have reason. Usually, if they're on a hit list, the inspectors have a reason. The reason why I brought up graft before is like if you don't pay us off, you're going to see us more often. That kind of thing. I don't really think that a whole lot of that happens here in the Niagara region. I might be naive about that, but I don't know. All I know is they have regulations. And they have to meet there. And you want restaurants and other health things like tattoo parlors to be regulated. And there is a minimum set of standards they have to reach. If they are actually closing a restaurant, that is bad. If they are putting a notice on the restaurant that said that this restaurant has not really met the requirements, you can get that. You can get inspection reports, and sometimes they're not good, not bad enough to close the restaurant, but you can see that they're maybe not living up to what they should do. Now, you'd have to get a restaurant owner in here to really tell you what they think of it,
Well, without naming names, what they're talking about here is food storage racks, shelves, and pallets readily cleanable. The premises protected against entrance of pets and kept free from conditions that lead to harboring and breeding of pests. All right. Another one here. Adequate records are retained on premises, and adequate number of hand washing stations maintained and kept adequately supplied with relevant cleaning materials. Food storage racks and shelves or pallets readily cleanable again. Food storage, cleaning of food storage racks is an important aspect.
Yeah. So let's. So all of these things make a big difference. And like I said before, if they're closing them down, there are some pretty big breaches. Because they don't normally close them down. If they find some problems, they'll put it in the report. You can read it. You can read ABC restaurant on 123 Street. Well, you know what? They're kind of dirty in the kitchen. They're this. Their garbage disposal is not good. But those things are not enough to have them closed down. Yeah. The inspector tells them about them and comes back, but meanwhile makes the report to let the world know that this is this restaurant's functioning, but there's things wrong with it, and you should know that.
Yeah. And what's in this report is one hotel restaurant and one long-standing restaurant in the downtown, in the tourist core, were closed.
What was the tourist core one?
This is Guru Fine Indian Cuisine at 5705. So they're long-term restaurants. They've been around there for a long time. The other one was Travel Lodge Falls View Hotel Restaurant. So
well, look, those are both like Travel Lodge, and I think Travel Lodge is part where a lot of the isn't it a lot
this
of
is
where
the one at
Islamic
5599. This is the one at 5599 River Road.
Oh, the Travel Lodge on River Road.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay. Not the one on Lundy's Lane. Well, look,
no.
The Guru restaurant may have been a good restaurant up until now. It may have had a change of staff. It may have had a change of owners. So that the Guru restaurant, they actually closed it down. So there are serious problems if they closed it down.
Yeah, yeah. And the other one here was an African market and convenience store in St. Catharines.
So yeah, there's another one.
And they're talking about for staff things like, records maintained properly, protected against entrance of pests, kept free from conditions that lead to harboring or breeding of pests.
Well, yeah, you're going to find cockroaches. You're going to find mice. Those places that I used to work on in Clifton Hill, it was almost avoidable. Like, there would be a cockroach here and there. They try to grab it. They were fighting that stuff all the time.
Okay, the information here is that all of these restaurants, all of these places were actually opened within days of gain of following. So, the African market was opened on June 18th. The restaurant was opened on June 13th, and the hotel restaurant was opened the same day as the errors were found. So they were only temporary closures, but
they're temporary closures because the inspector comes in and says, I can't, like, he or she will come in and says, well, you can keep going, but you have to fix this by a certain time, and I'm coming back next week, and it better be done. But in another case, they walk in and they say, there's no way we can continue your operation. You are going to be a risk of the public the way you're running things now. Get it fixed, and if you do, I'll come back and give you the green light again. So they're doing their job. Like, I don't know. You said they might be OC. I think that's the opposite. I think there's just not enough inspectors, and it's and believe me, they're going to be. Somebody's going to tip them off that they're coming, and all these other things that happen. Sometimes I think they do. I'm becoming soon. You better make sure your stuff, especially for places that are on the sort of on the border there or on the edge. But I don't know. There's one place that was closed that I would go to, not by choice, but I would just be there because other people were there. It was very some years ago. It was very, very. I used to hear stories from people who worked there. And I thought, oh, my God, if half of these stories are true. And then next thing you know, the place is closed down. The Board of Health come in and closed it down. And one lady I knew that worked there, she said she couldn't work there anymore because of the stuff they did.
Yeah. The trouble is some of these stories from the people who work there are not always to be relied upon. Sometimes
exactly, but when I talked to her and she told me the things that went on there, and then they closed it down.
Yeah,
and it was closed down for quite a while,
a long time. Yeah.
So they were pretty bad.
Yep. Oh yeah, absolutely. All right, let me see if I can get this damn video to play. Thing to play.
Being perpetrated in our name by the state of Israel.
Now, who is this for? First of all, tell us who it is.
Canadians on account of Canada's deep as Jews, many of us of Israeli origin, many of us descendant from Holocaust.
Oh, okay.
Holocaust survivors. We feel a particular sense of responsibility to stand up against the reprehensible crimes being perpetrated in our name by the state of Israel. Yet we say not in our names, not just as Jews, but also as Canadians, on account of Canada's deep complicity with Israel's crimes. This complicity comes in many forms, from the arms trade to the suppression of speech on Palestine through false accusations of anti-Semitism, for example. It also comes through taxpayer-subsidized charitable donations to Israeli organizations, several of whom are directly and deeply implicated in Israeli war crimes. Through one organization, just one of these, Mizrahi Canada, Canadians can donate to radical settler group Women in Green, which has an ongoing fundraising campaign entitled Demolish, Enter, Remain in Gaza. They can donate to Im Tafsu, which publicly brags about participating in blockading aid trucks getting into Gaza, which could be Canadian aid as well. You can go to their website and you can click, donate in charitable funds, and it'll take you to this Mizrahi Canada website to donate. They can donate to an undercover IDF unit known for assassinating Palestinians, the Duvdevan unit. They can even donate directly to the illegal West Bank settlement of Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, as another example. And you can get tax breaks for doing that, subsidized by the rest of us, including Palestinian Canadians. I'll let that sink in a little bit. It's now been 2 months since IJV, along with Miles Howe, who you hear from in a minute, and Just Peace Advocates, sent a public letter to the Minister of National Revenue, Marie-Claude Bibeau. This letter follows decades of official complaints from our organizations, with hundreds, if not thousands, of pages of incriminating evidence about organizations like Mizrahi Canada, like the Jewish National Fund of Canada, like the Ne'eman Foundation. There's a long list. Yet despite the mountain of evidence showing these organizations violating Canadian law, these organizations continue to get off scot-free by successive liberal and conservative governments. This is not just a few bad apples. This is a systemic issue that requires systemic solutions to make sure that, as MP Ashton rightly stated, not 1 cent of Canadian tax dollars goes to funding genocide.
There we go.
I'm very glad, because we don't want to know that, do we? We don't want to know that Canadians are the ones that help funding the brutality of settlerism or the hard right wing. The Mizrahi means Egyptian or African Jews. Basically, that's the Mizratim are Jews from basically Arab countries that migrated from the Arab countries like Morocco, Libya, Algeria, Egypt. I think even Iraq came into Israel. Now they would have been Jews they're not even Sephardic. They're different altogether. Normally you think of Jews as being Ashkenazi, Sephardic, but these are Mizratim. So they come from the Arab world. So I don't know what the significance of that name is for that group, but they have the Woman in Green outfit under their umbrella, and Demolish, Enter, and Remain in Gaza. Angela Brown says, our listener says, and Canada Revenue Agency regulates charities, need to be on the lookout. They're afraid, though. They are very afraid of doing anything with Israel. They'll jump all over something like the Proud Boys, who haven't done anything in Canada at all. They're not, and call them a terrorist group. And even the United States, where they did do some naughty stuff or pretty bad stuff, they're not even a terrorist group, but they'll look the other way on stuff like this. And quite often I have a feeling that we have our own Israeli lobby that's very strong here. I just have that suspicion, because you can tell by the way in which the people at the top talk. When when Trudeau talks about the hideous, horrible massacre and the problems, and then the problems in Gaza, the unacceptable problems in Gaza, the unacceptable suffering in Gaza. There's a wholly different kind of tone, isn't it? The horrendous, brutal massacre on October 7th, but the terrible suffering of the Palestinians is the other part of it. No, they're brutally being horribly massacred the same way. You know, there's, I don't know. We just have this, we have a Israeli-centric view of things, and I don't know. But I'll have to say this though: Chrystia Freeland's come out and said that it is totally unacceptable what's happening now, and things have got to stop. And she was unequivocal on this one, which helped me out a bit. She didn't waffle. She didn't say, we don't like violence of any kind of statement. This was directly directed at Israel. So I'll have to tip my hat to her on that one. Yeah.
And, you know, okay, so it's not often that we play videos from other sources, but that is something that, you know, is just, well, I think needed to be played because, you know, this is a Jewish person living here in Canada who's now living in Montreal. He spent 4 years living in Palestine, working for Oxfam, where he was involved in research and advocacy and program management about aid to Palestine. And when you think about it, even not at war, people in Palestine, in Gaza, have been under the gun, under attack, not necessarily physically under attack, but under verbal attack from Israel for decades.
Yeah, this fellow who is speaking there, you pointed out, his name is Corey Balsam.
Yeah,
he's a Canadian from Montreal. Well, he's living in Montreal now, and he worked for Oxfam for 4 years in the Palestinian areas. Do you think he knows what he's talking about?
Of course he does. Yeah.
Yes, he does.
He does. Absolutely.
And where are the ears to that?
Yeah.
Our politicians have closed off ears.
Yeah.
Most of them do. They have they have blinders that will open only to certain things. We find this particularly troubling in the United States, where they're going to bring Netanyahu into the Congress to speak. Can you believe it?
No, yeah.
And they're all going to clap because each one of them has a APEC minder pulling on them, pulling on their puppet strings to make them clap. So seriously, a guy like that's up for war crimes is being celebrated in the United States. Seriously,
he should be flown to the Hague and put in prison.
Him and Smotrich and the other guy, not Gantz, but the other, I keep forgetting the third guy. These hard right wingers. We find now Netanyahu has come up with a message for Americans where he says, "Oh, Blinken's been over here. We had a good talk, but I had to tell him, you're not giving us enough weapons fast enough. Don't try to hold back weapons. That's against us." So he's given a message. He's end-rounding Blinken. He's end-rounding Biden, and he's given out his own message to the American people. Now, he did this to Obama too, and I'll never. If I was an American, I would never vote for anyone who accepted that kind of thing. You might as well. I don't know. You might as well have Kim Jong-un in there. You know what I mean? It's a similar kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay. So Angela's saying death toll per Palestinians is miles higher than that of Israel. Like that individual in the recording, many people I know from the Jewish community do not like seeing what Israel is doing in their name.
Yeah. Well, the Israelis are all baffled by our, apparently, from what I can gather from people I've seen on YouTube or read, they're kind of baffled about about all of our misgivings about what's happening in Gaza, because they are getting a sort of a extremely edited version of the war. They are seeing the war as it goes on, but their parts of it is being completely edited.
Yeah,
and they are most of them are for the crushing of Gaza. And they don't understand. They don't really understand the lengths by which the IDF is going. They also so they've taken news agencies that are more likely to cover the Palestinian end of things, like Al Jazeera, and banned them from Israel. If you're a free society in Al Jazeera, I mean, if you've got Fox in there and you're banning Al Jazeera, seriously?
Yeah. Absolutely. And you know, I'm like, I'm one of the key issues I think we've had in the West is those who blindly accept that what Israel states to be is the truth. And I am opposed to all kinds of terrorism, especially state-sponsored terrorism. And the other aspect that needs to be kind of brought out here, Western Islamophobia is driving silence about the crimes of current regimes. The Hamas invasion was wrong. I think we've said that numerous times. But what Israel is doing is genocide. Right? I will not be any. I will state that clearly. Netanyahu should be tried in The Hague for war crimes. He should be going to the International Criminal Court, and he should be spending the rest of his life in jail.
Netanyahu is supposed to be a religious Jew. Biden is supposed to be a devout Catholic. Well, those are two people who've got reservations in hell right now. Biden will not use his power to stop the war. He's afraid of his election coming up. He's tried a few things, but Netanyahu's pretty much told the whole world that he's the boss here. That the Israeli whatever their influence is much stronger than, and holds a lot of sway. So it's not a very good situation for the Palestinians coming up. They've got a radical leadership, and they've got this murderous opponent that likes to do collective punishment. And so the Israelis will always start. First of all, they started, denying the death count, and then they can't do that anymore because there's too many witnesses in there. And then they deny the amount of food that's getting in there, but there's too many witnesses, so they have to stop doing that. And then they say things like, well, the civilian to soldier death ratio is acceptable, 2-to-1, 2 civilians for every insurgent. But they make up the figures. They say, okay, we've killed 10,000, 10 or 15,000 Hamas soldiers. But other estimates are more like 4,000 or 5,000 by independent people. So we'll never know the truth.
We won't never know the truth about it. We will not. We won't ever know the truth about it. The other thing, by the way, that also is connected here, since we mentioned this on the Canadian basis, Canada is actually Public Safety Minister Dominic LeBlanc made a statement that Canada is pronouncing Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard a terrorist organization.
Yeah, they like to do that. I don't like I said before, they made the Proud Boys a terrorist group. Where in the United States, where they actually have done bad things, they're not considered a terrorist group. I think that Canada just likes to do that kind of thing. I'm not so sure. Like I said, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. I'm not so sure if there was you see, I'm just I don't know. Of course, I don't like the Revolutionary Guard. Of course, anything that meddles in violence, that kind. But are they any worse than the IDF? I'll put that out there.
Yeah, and that's a fair comparison. Absolutely, that's a fair comparison. The stuff we've seen the Iran's Revolutionary Guard do is on a par with what we've seen in this war with the IDF.
I bet you the Iranian Revolutionary Guard couldn't show you 40,000 bodies and 100,000 people injured. I bet you they couldn't do that. I bet you they can't say, guess what? We're the Iran Revolutionary Guard, and we feel like we feel like underlings compared to the IDF. Look how much they kill. We haven't even been able to come close to it.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, you're comparing. We're happy to. My point though is we're happy to put. We as Canada are happy to stick Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps on our terrorism watch list, and yet we won't do the same to the state of Israel.
No, we won't. And unfortunately, that is the hypocrisy of democracies right now.
Yeah,
the massive hypocrisy of democracies. You'd think that the democracies would try to work towards peace and justice and all that other things, which the things they espouse, but they don't. They pick and choose, sadly.
Yeah. And, this bothers me. And, it bothers me. And this whole question about the war in Gaza. Yeah, that's given me a lot to worry about. Okay. So wonder who they consider to be Hamas. There's so many children and civilians killed. 4-year-old kids and babies couldn't be Hamas.
Yeah, really. Yeah, really. The population of Gaza, 2/3 of it, I think it's 65% are 23 years and younger. Almost 1/2 of the population is 14 and younger. Like 48% or something is 14 and younger.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely none of them are belligerents. I mean, the 14-year-olds maybe will pick up a rock and throw it at an Israeli soldier or a sling. That's about it. But the other ones are kids. And even that group that's between the ages of 14 and 23 that make up that other from 50% to 65%, they're young people, 23 years and younger, from the ages of 14 to 23. They may dabble in Hamas work from here and there. You can understand they were born in that fenced-in compound, and of course they're just festering and festering. They have no life, no place to put their ambitions, no opportunities. The unemployment rate is incredible. If you're lucky, you'll get a job in Israel, but there's about 18,500 people live or out of Gaza work in or used to work in Israel. Well, that's like a tiny portion of the workforce.
Yeah.
You're lucky to get those jobs because they probably pay a little bit better. But the whole reason why they're bringing Palestinians into Israel to work is for cheap wages, basically. Right. They wouldn't take them in otherwise.
Okay. Right. And then again, we got Mike with his comment. How do we watch Ukraine be destroyed by Russia and do nothing?
Well, the thing is, we helped Russia do that. Right now, the reason why Russia did what it did is because NATO was sticking their nose in there. They forced the Russians to do that. I think the Russians could probably negotiate something better than invading. But it's very obvious that NATO wasn't going to give them a break. They were going to put a NATO base right there. It would have been about the third time that NATO lied to the Russia about where they were going to put their next country. They lied 2 or 3 times prior to that about, we stopped doing our NATO thing now, and then they would take a couple of more countries in. So then,
at the end of the day, at the end of the day, that Black Sea, those ports out of Odessa and the northern part of that sea there gets Russia access to the Mediterranean, gets Russia access through the Suez Canal into the Red Sea and the Gulf of Arabia, etc., and out into the Indian Ocean, right? With it, that is absolutely vital for the Russian supply chain.
It's not only that; it's if NATO takes what they wanted to do is have NATO take on Ukraine. That would have, at that particular time, it would have taken in Crimea, which has been a naval base for the Russians since 1780, and you know that's been Russian naval base. So NATO would have then been able to take over that, and the Donbass is where the Russian army is now. Those areas. What Putin is doing here is putting a buffer zone there. Everybody knows that buffer zone is going to stay there. Everybody knows that Crimea is going to stay in the hands of Russia. And everybody knows that there's going to be a lot more blood and nothing else is going to change. That we just have to stop that war, make a deal with Russia, say, okay, we'll revisit this in 50 years or something and have a vote or whatever else. But those eastern townships are Donbasses are mostly Russian speaking anyway. There's about 20% of Ukrainian or of Russian ethnicity, and they generally live in those areas. So there is, and the Crimea itself had no problem turning over its jurisdiction to Russia. So there are complications here that we don't really understand. And as Mike said, NATO is a joke, but NATO caused this. I mean, look what NATO dangled a carrot in Georgia, little Georgia at the other end of the Black Sea. So there's Georgia at the east end of the Black Sea and Ukraine on the north shore of the Black Sea. And they're going to entice Georgia into coming into NATO and block off some more of the Black Sea. Seriously, do you really think Russia would have put up with that? Do you think if China came into our, into Canada and started putting up bases along the coast areas and on the Great Lakes, do you think the United States would put up with it?
No, exactly. And the whole point about this whole question about Odessa and the like, and Russian entry into the Black Sea, and what they don't like about Ukraine's dominance there is the whole presence of Ukraine essentially takes off the whole northern block of the Black Sea, makes it further for Russians to get around Ukraine in order to get to their shipping, etc., on the Black Sea.
Well, I'm going to have to say goodbye now.
Yeah.
And I have workmen coming back into the place today. This should be the last day they'd be working in here. But I have a bunch of new windows, and I'm going to get the rest of them. Today, one more new window and a sliding door. So I just say that to make you all jealous out there. And also, remember, we're still going on our heat wave today, aren't we? And
yeah,
so
we have. It's going to be breaking over the weekend, is what I understand, or maybe Monday, Tuesday next week. But expect more rain.
Yes. Well, in that, I will say, without further ado, I bid you adieu. Pray for peace. Bye-bye.